Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Directions Geospatial webinar, today sponsored by Pitney Bowes. I'm Barbara Duke, Managing Editor here at Directions Magazine with our assistant webinar producer, Lynette Qualia. We have another talented team with us today. Joe Veltz and Kevin Kyle from Pitney Bowes are here, and Chris Keaton from LPA. They're here to give us some great examples and some wonderful demonstrations on how you can use advanced analytics and inform some better decisions in your organization. We're glad to have them here today, and I know that they've got some great solutions for you. And so we will transition now over to Joe.
Thank you very much. And you should be seeing my screen right now. And again, as mentioned, today we're going to be discussing advanced location analytics with IBM Cognos, Pitney Bowes Data. We have myself, Kevin Kyle, and Chris Keaton from LPA on our call today. So, quick overview of our agenda. We're going to do a quick brief on who LPA is, what they offer, and how they can help you. Give you an overview on Pitney Bowes, talking about boundary data included with Cognos, geospatial data, additional data sets that Pitney Bowes provides, and time allows Q&A session. And as mentioned earlier, please submit the questions via the WebEx chat feature. And if we aren't able to get to a question, we'll definitely follow up post-webinar and get you the correct answer or an answer to your question. One thing I wanted to call out, LPA has a handful of great resources on previous webinars that they have done on topics that cover IBM Cognos analytics, data modules, dashboarding, manufacturing, financial performance, and they also have all of those published on YouTube. For those of you that spend a few minutes each day on YouTube, please check those out at lpa.com/resources. Now, how can LPA help? Within the Cognos environment, if you're looking to do anything and everything around upgrade and migration services, reporting services, health checks, training. I know Chris has done some extensive training in the last couple of weeks. We were talking about that last night. So if you guys are looking for any types of services, these are all areas that LPA, the team, the staff there are experts in and can definitely help and are looking forward to that in the future. From a Pitney Bowes standpoint, for those of you that aren't familiar with Pitney Bowes, we actually have acquired over 20 software companies in the last 30 years, and we've done a complete platform rewrite, and we've opened it up, or we described it as 4 lines of business, or 4 areas of business. The first one being what we've branded Identify, which is similar to information management. So when you talk about data integration, data quality, when you want to transform your data inside of our platform, that all falls under the Identify line of business. The next one, which is critical to today's conversation, is what we've branded Locate. And Locate is all about the ability to answer the question where the data is, where your customers are, stores, businesses, how you can grow your business, essentially all and everything around location intelligence. The third line of business is your Communicate. And Communicate is the ability to actually interact with your customer. So after I've identified my customer or my business, I've located them, the next obvious step would be to communicate. And so we have a range of products that offer functionality for interaction with customers. And then the last one is data. We have a global data portfolio, that covers a range of functionality from geospatial APIs to big data frameworks. We have hundreds of customers that work with our location data on the e-commerce side. And some of the other unique things about us worldwide, we have over 4,000 data sets. We're north of 1.5 million customers in the small to medium, 3,300 active patents. From a software side, around our advanced matching technology, we have over 30 patents. And again, a lot of our data touches on specific to location, whether it be neighborhoods, whether it be stores, points of interest, financial, risk portfolio. So again, if you have any questions specific to the software platform or what we do from a data standpoint to enrich your Cognos analytics environment, please feel free to ask those questions. Thank you, and now I'm going to hand it over to Chris.
I am really happy to be here today to talk about one of my favorite topics, location, location, location. It's not just a catchphrase anymore. Geospatial analytics is becoming a differentiator in the market for most organizations who are interested in leveraging the location component of their data. That tidbit that over 80% of business data contains some form of location component is as true as ever. Whether it's a postal code, a city, a state, this data that you have at your fingertips can be leveraged to help you move to the next level. We spend a lot of time analyzing the what and the who, but how much time do we really spend looking at the where? The where can give us a little more information, for instance, such as perhaps the why or the how. If we understand our customer, our consumer, where they come from, the context that surrounds them on their day-to-day life, we can get closer to the consumer. This is an important differentiator in an era where people expect us to know them. They expect us to be closer to them than ever before. So understanding that customer, that should be a key strategic initiative for our organization and strengthen our analytic portfolio big time. Geospatial data in Cognos has been around for a while, but with the release of Cognos Analytics 11.07 and beyond, geospatial data becomes much more integrated with the overall platform. This, in thanks to the Pitney Bowes and IBM partnership, that allows Cognos to take advantage of literally hundreds of thousands of unique areas across 253 countries and territories. You can see administrative boundaries in countries like Brazil, postcode boundaries in countries like Switzerland, and even in our own backyard. Being able to zoom in on this level of data within your Cognos reports can truly help you differentiate yourselves from the competition, because you can drill in, you can understand where people are coming from, and understand what they've experienced to come to you. The geospatial data within Cognos 11.07 at this point in time is based heavily within the dashboarding functionality. So you can see here I've created a dashboard that is focused on the state of Massachusetts. And you can see the boundaries of towns have been highlighted and population data is showing on a screen tip. If you look at the call out on the bottom left, you can see even structure level detail here. You know, I've been to a lot of webinars, and oftentimes I say, yeah, that's great, cool, thanks for the screenshots. Can you prove it? So I'm going to take a moment here and I'm going to show you how I created this report. So put yourself in the mindset of a company that, you know, we don't have geocoding yet. We just have some good data. We have some good zip codes. You know, we're really sort of at the beginning of our journey. But I want to see how geospatial data is going to be consumed by my users. So I have a population spreadsheet, just a simple XLS that has population data across the state of Massachusetts. I'm going to very easily import that into my Cognos environment and create a dashboard showing me where the population concentrations are across the state, perhaps to help me prove that I should put a new store location at a certain point in the state, or to show you simply how quick and easy it is to create a map in the new version of Cognos Analytics. So let's jump over and take a look at the environment. As you can see, I've got a Cognos Analytics environment up here loaded on my demo sandbox. And on the desktop of this machine is a file called Massachusetts Population. Now I can scroll down here on the welcome screen and click Browse to browse and find this file in the location, or even easier, I can just take it, drag it, and drop it right into the Cognos environment. Cognos analyzes that data, looks at city, state, and country, recognizes the population is probably a measure, as you can see by the highlighted Carpenter square there, that's the measure icon. And I say, hey, this looks about right. And I click the OK button. And that is literally all I need to do to import this into my environment. You just got a little free preview of the next demo there. Now, how do I go ahead and interact with this population spreadsheet that I just brought in? Well, I can find it in my My folders, and I can simply click on it. Cognos recognizes that this is going to be a dashboard based on the file that I clicked. I'm going to go ahead and choose a blank template, and you'll see already loaded Massachusetts population. Now, Cognos has been pretty smart here. Based on profiling that data, it says, hey, looks like city, state, and country are geospatial data elements. And you can tell that because they've got the little map pin to the left of the name. We also have a measure, population. The first thing I do is drag country over to my workspace. With country on the workspace, Cognos says, oh, based on this file, I can see we've got data for the United States. So it zooms in on the US. But that's not quite everything I need to do, right? So what I want to do is expand here and add a little extra context. My context in this case is going to be state and city. So if I take city, drop it under country, you'll see the map refreshes. Says, hey, looks like you're looking for Massachusetts. If I take city, drop that in there, it's going to go ahead and draw my administrative boundaries within the state of Massachusetts. Now, I don't have any color shading yet because I haven't given it a measure. So to do that, I'm going to take population, drop it over into the location color area. You'll see the map is going to redraw, now with my towns within the state of Massachusetts highlighted based on their population density. Zooming in, I can see an incredible amount of detail as I work around this map. So I'm going to take a look at the corner of Worcester and Grafton here. And you see I'm already getting street level data as I zoom in. And the further I go, you can actually see structure level data beginning to appear. Houses, businesses, etc. So this is telling me here along the edge of Worcester, I'm starting to see a population density decrease as I work out towards the east. So maybe I can make a good decision about where to place a new store location. Clicking around that map, I can see a whole lot of data. This is a very powerful mapping tool that is now completely embedded within Cognos right out of the box. Other dashboard elements can be added, charts, graphs, lists, etc. It's just part of the game now. So let's take a look back. So that's pretty cool. All right, Chris, but I want to do more. I'm on this webinar because I'm a geospatial analyst, and maps are great, and I love that it doesn't take me too much effort. Heck, I can get a map in a couple of minutes there. But I really need to see the next level. The next level is brought to you by the partnership of IBM and Pitney Bowes through the Pitney tool Spectrum Spatial for BI. SSBI provides an API interface between Cognos Analytics, your environment, your data, and the Pitney Bowes Spectrum Spatial geospatial technology. It integrates that geographic interface in Cognos Analytics. It gives you some new little widgets within your reporting environment that you can drag onto the tool and create reports such as we can see below, heat maps, right? I've got a nice chart, but there's a client density heat map available for me on the right side of that dashboard. That is an amazing tool. I can do point-based information, as you can see on the far right. If I have geospatial Latin launch tag data, I can bring in volumes of data about where specific people may be. These are the things that kick us into high gear as it relates to geospatial data. So what other kinds of questions can I answer with SSBI Cognos Analytics? So depending on your industry vertical, you may be looking at average income for a target group of customers within a 10-mile radius. That would be great to know. What about from an HR perspective? If I move my headquarters, how about that daily commute increase? Is that going to be a significant change for our employees that could heavily impact job satisfaction? In the case of service technicians, where I'm planning routes, I can do something called the traveling salesman algorithm, which I'll demo for you in a few minutes, to show how my service tech can travel from point to point in the most efficient way possible, route planning. And combine that with other reports that show me part level on their vehicle to make sure they have all the necessary parts as they head out on their journey for the day. How about the top 10% of our customers? Where do they come from? What is their distance to my stores? How far are people traveling to do business with me? And how far might they be willing to travel? From a utilities style standpoint, what about median distance of our facilities to water hydrants and other points of interest? So there are a lot of great questions that can be answered. There isn't an industry that can't benefit from geospatial data. So let's take a look at some of the comparison. Because up until this point, I've really been focusing on what you can do with Cognos Analytics out of the box without having to add any additional functionality, such as SSBI. But the power comes in when I add that SSBI integration. Let's take a look just at the data layer perspective. Cognos 11 performs very well here. You can do points and circles, you can do polygons, drilling from report to report, as well as integration of any kind of world boundary data. You can bring in demographic and industry-specific data sets if you purchase them separately, and they will show up on any of your reports. The Pitney tool includes all of that. From a functionality perspective, Cognos on its own needs a little help here. Not to say that that functionality isn't great, but if I want to do this extra stuff, if I want to do the distance and the drive times, spider plots, multiple layers, ad hoc markers, things like that, the Pitney Bowes Cognos integration is truly a powerful integration that you can acquire. Now, looking at that as it compares to some of the competitors, that one that starts with T, for instance, we see, yeah, there's a little bit of geospatial capability, but there's an awful lot of caveats, right? This has to be this way. I need to include this extra little piece of tool. With Cognos and Pitney, you're green pretty much right down the board. Click, not so great here. Cognos and Pitney is the answer if you truly want to do geospatial analysis. Consider just doubling down on location. So adding SSBI into your stack doesn't heavily increase the footprint. It doesn't require weeks and weeks of planning. It's a relatively light installation. It can be done in a matter of an afternoon, a couple of days, depending on the complexity of your install. And it fits nicely with your applications here, providing that API component between your data and the spectrum spatial data, postal code suburbs, etc. So that's great, Chris. Thanks. You told me we can do this stuff. How about you show it to me? So we're going to take a look at two demos. The first one is a regional supermarket. Think of, we're going to call them natural foods. They're a supermarket that wants to take a look at the surroundings. So first of all, there are 3 teams that can be helped by this data in this case. Probably a lot more, but we're going to zero in on security, who wants to look at the store location and understand data about crimes and help make decisions about security staffing, camera placement, parking lot lighting, all the things they might want to invest in to make for a safer location. It's all about prioritization. From a strategy perspective, marketing or new projects might want to take a look at some of the demographic information surrounding their stores to help determine places where they might pilot newer high-end prepared foods, perhaps home delivery of food services, those types of things that might be better off launched in an area with a tiny bit more disposable income because people tend to be willing to try things out when times aren't as tight. From a competitive intelligence standpoint, we can take a look at our existing locations and the concentration of competitors around them, and perhaps areas where there aren't as much competition, and maybe locate a new store or move a store based on that kind of competition. So let's take a look at these. The features we're going to look at here are location plotting as well as map layers. So over in our Cognos environment, I'm going to close my previously written dashboard. and you can see that I've run the natural foods security map. Nice fall colors here. The stars on the map are my store locations, and I've already turned on a burglary index layer. This is data which was brought into the environment that tells me, based on a scale, the legend is telling me, with the usual index, 100 is a good thing, right? And less or 100 is sort of the target, right? Less than 100 in this case is a good thing. Greater than 100 is not so great. So if you can see, this is zoomed in on western central New York, the Rochester area. And you can see from a burglary index perspective, a couple of my stores are pretty close to not the best parts of town as we get closer to those red areas. With the tool, I can zoom in and zoom out, see down to the block level, block group level, which is definitely a lot more powerful than just zip code. So these block groups allow us to see serious boundaries as it relates to our information. If I fly out the layers, I can turn off the burglary index layer, and the map will redraw, showing me just my store locations and the details in terms of the streets. And then I'm interested in looking at the competition. So turning on the bars and liquor store layer allows me to see a pin for all organizations that sell liquor and beer and wine, because maybe I'm looking at getting into that market. If I click on a particular location, you see it's going to fly out. It gives me the exact address as well as the name of it and other information such as, is it open 24 hours? It may give me contact information, ownership here, as well as other good information about the store that is competing with my location. Turning off the bar and liquor store for the competition analysis, actually, let's make a decision here. If I'm going to bring in liquor sales to one of my stores, it looks like there's less of a concentration of liquor stores around here, a little bit more competition down by the airport. Hopefully pilots aren't stopping at the liquor store before they go to the airport, but you can see it'll allow me to notice where I might want to go into that type of business. All right, I can turn off the bar and liquor store layer, and then I can put on a composite crime index. Now this is a little different than my burglary index. Okay, so that was a focus specifically on crimes categorized as burglaries. The composite crime index is intended to be a little more broad in terms of what crimes it categorizes. The crime index, you can see, is somewhat similar to my burglary index, which makes sense, but we might see that our store locations are a little further away from the concentration area that I saw earlier. So what that's going to tell me, or my security team, is that the burglaries aren't as much of a crime concern, perhaps, for these two stores as I initially thought it would be. Or actually, vice versa. A little more burglaries. The general crime index is not as strong near them. So maybe it's a little more burglary centric. So how about I put more cameras, station a little more security staff around these two stores? Obviously, with more data, we would be able to make more refined decisions, but this layering technology gives me a whole lot of power around my analysis. All right, so the next report we're going to run is the store performance and population report. So if I click on this report, it'll go ahead and run. We're going to take a look at roughly the same geographic area, and I can see my stores plotted across the western part of New York State. they're plotted with a red, yellow, green style metric, which tells me a little bit about how they're performing. Green, of course, being better performing source. If I click in on a particular store, you can see the address, as well as I've embedded a line chart from Cognos that shows me weekly store performance. If we sort of take the mean, we can see this store has its ups and downs, and last week was probably one of the biggest downs. So that information on its own can tell us a fair amount, but let's actually see what it's like to drill through. If I click on this drill through link up here called store, it's going to pop open another report. In this case, a report that I've written called store, which plots the specific store that I'm looking at along with a consumer vitality index. This consumer vitality index, again, over 100 being a pretty good thing, under 100 being not as great. So if I take a look at this store, these lightly shaded areas, they're the ones that I want to target for my pilot programs for the higher end goods and services. And in this case, this store happens to be surrounded by a fair amount of vital customers, as we say, in terms of these block groups. Its actual location, block group isn't as great, but you can see those surrounding lightly sort of cream colored areas are definitely ripe for possibility there. If I were to take a look at another store, perhaps one closer to the center of the city, drill through on that, I might see a slightly different story. In this case, I need to go a little further to find those consumers that might have a little extra money to throw around. So I probably won't choose this store for my high-end prepared foods pilot. I'm more likely to go to the one we just looked at previously. All right. So I think we looked at security. We saw some crime information, burglary, composite crime index. We took a look at some of the demographic information in terms of vitality indexes. And we also took at a location and saw the competitors in a particular area, in this case, bar and liquor sales. And we were able to see what we were dealing with there from a number of fronts based on what's surrounding our stores. That alone gives me dozens of potential feed-ins to decisions that I might want to make as an executive for Natural Foods. So how about that other stuff we talked about? We talked about route planning, drive times, staffing information. Well, let's take a look at some of that. So now we take off our grocery store hat and we put on our specialized medical equipment distributor hat. So imagine we are a medical sterilization company that has service techs that go from medical location to medical location, servicing the equipment that sterilizes their tools. A couple of things we want to take a look at in this map is to understand staffing. Do we have service tech coverage that is close to our current and potential customers? Are our service techs in the right locations? How about the service department? Now, this is the planning group. This planning group might want to help our techs decide what the most efficient route is so that they can more effectively utilize their working hours. So we're going to use that algorithm to plot the most efficient route based on drive times and give them a printout of where they should be going from point to point to point. Both very powerful, very resource optimizing type of analysis. So I come over, I close my tab. I work for a company called CleanCo. I'm trying to figure out why I'm looking at natural foods. This is interesting. We must have a shared environment. I also have a very cheesy sense of humor. So back on my welcome screen, I see I actually do have some CleanCo information. This is a service tech areas report that I can run. CleanCo we'll see is actually based out in California near Los Angeles. And if I take a look at this report, I can see my field technicians. They are denoted by the green dots. You can see I can zoom in and out. Those field technicians, if I click on a green dot, I can pull up their address and their information. But that is not all. How about we take a look at some of the layers? Turn on my medical points of interest layer, and I see triangles here for all of the potential and current clients of my organization. Clicking on a triangle gives me information, including the location, what type of classification they have from a zip code level, as well as location name, phone numbers, zip codes, latitude, longitude, all kinds of great information that might help me out. But truthfully, the most valuable thing to me is this concentration. So if I take a look around, do I see concentrated service techs where my clients are? Looking at this, I see I might have a little problem down here around Manhattan Beach. I've got a lot of medical points of interest. I don't seem to have a green dot there, service tech to take care of them. So it looks like my service tech near LAX may end up being overworked. So I want to make sure that I can get some coverage down there in the southwest part of the city. But wait, there is more. So let's take a look at some of the visualizations I can do. First of all, I might want to filter down my view. In this case, there's an opportunity to say, hey, select by travel time. So I can select a point on my map, all right? And when I select that point on my map, it'll show me everything within a certain radius. That radius can be determined by a number of minutes. You can see in this case it's set to 5 minutes. It can also be set to a distance, miles, feet, yards, etc. I'm going to say show me everything within 10 minutes of this service rep right here. And then clicking on that map, you can see it's drawn a polygon for me that shows me a 10-minute drive from everywhere. It looks like I've got a little bit of a dead zone here off the 405. Anyone from LA might say, oh my gosh, the traffic on the 405. But this is a very legitimate version of drive time. Okay. If I want to use this as a selection to zoom in and focus, I can go ahead and play this and it'll redraw the map, showing me only the entities within that drive time, as well as a list of them right in my reports. Other information that I might be able to do. So in this case, let's take a look at some of these visualization layers I can add. So you can see hotspots and heat maps. If I turn on hotspot, for instance, I can specify the data set of medical points of interest and show me hotspots by the SIC code and apply it. And you can see I've got definitive areas of focus that I might want to pay attention to on the perimeter of this, this particular 10-minute drive time area. That may be of very important strategic information for me. I can go ahead, click back. I can leave this hotspot on or I can turn it off. The most interesting area perhaps for me is going to be this routing. So I'm going to select a smaller area of the map. In this case, an area where I know my tech is going to be driving today. I'm going to select this circle right here. The map will redraw and focus on that circle, and I'm going to choose routing. And my options here are going to be medical points of interest, and I want to select a start point and an end point. In this case, my start point I'm going to select my text location. I'm going to do the same thing for my endpoints. And I am going to click apply. And after clicking apply, what I see is my locations in order of the most optimal distance based on time. I can also do it based on distance. And the results pane shows me 1, 2, all the way through to my 10th stop of the day, which is actually going to be really close to home base. But you can see I don't want to go there first, according to the time and distance calculation. That one will be my last stop. All right, so you can see a fair amount of exciting value that can be gathered out of this traveling salesman algorithm. Other visualizations include clustering. I can do some gradients. I can have a spider chart, as well as heat maps. All of these are available with just a few clicks. So it's pretty exciting stuff if you're interested in finding out how to get your people out into the field in the most efficient manner possible. So I think we've effectively answered the question of the staffing department, understanding the coverage of where the customers are and where our service techs are, as well as the service department helping us plan the most efficient routes so that we can use those working hours in the best possible way. Other information, we've been leveraging a lot of data sets. These data sets are based on Dun & Bradstreet data or other nationally recognized data set providers that are brought into Pitney data sets that I can use for not just location data, but as well as demographic and industry data sets that are targeted based on things like insurance risk, oil exploration, and the like. So it isn't just about demographics. It can be very, very specifically tailored to your industry for your analysis. Those data sets are an amazing opportunity for us to really drill in and understand how the data around us impacts our specific line of business. There are so many other capabilities that we could drill into. No analytic pun intended there. Geocoding. Pitney offers me the ability to geocode on the fly. The latitude, longitude assigned can come back and be displayed on my map. So if I have a master data challenge where I don't have geocoding in my source, I can acquire that information and get it in there with Pitney as a partner. There's also an enterprise data quality capability, integration, MDM, information governance, as well as customer analytic possibilities through that particular offering. I could talk about these all individually for plenty of time on their own, but unfortunately we're running a little bit late on time, and I want to have some time for questions if people have them.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. Appreciate that demo. I want to get a little bit more into some of the nuts and bolts now that you've kind of seen a live demonstration of how we integrate the Spectrum Spatial map viewer into your existing Cognos dashboards. And now I want to talk a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of like how that all happens, what's all the pieces that you need to do all this. And I first want to talk about there's different types of users that are going to be consuming maps. The first thing that we're going to deal with is we're going to have people that are your geospatial experts or your analysts, and they're going to use our product called MapInfo Pro. This is a desktop mapping tool. It's been around since the 80s, a 30-year-old product. It's very, very complex product, has lots of functionality when it comes to geospatial calculations and rendering and creating maps. You also have your knowledge workers, and we have the ability of creating, we have a product called Spectrum Spatial Analyst. This is a web-based application. A lot of times this will get embedded, the API calls, into other people's products. So if there's maps embedded into another application, a lot of times that actually could be our mapping engine that they've natively embedded into their own applications. And the third area that we're talking about today is more for the analyst, the business user, the professional user, and that's using our product called Spectrum Spatial for BI. And this is what we have embedded in this case into Cognos. We also support all the major BI players out there, be it ClickSense or or Tableau or SAP Business Objects, Excel, Microsoft Reporting Services. So we actually have an agent for each of those other vendors as well. And the reason we wanted to have that is that's where all the consumers are. That's where all the eyeballs are. And we also want to leverage the power of those products. And I'll get a little bit deeper into that in just a second. So the timeline, if you look at things, desktop GIS has been around for a long time. We've been doing that. It's great. But again, it's a small number of users that typically will create a map. They might print it or publish it or do something with it to share. It's mostly around planning. There's also a shared version where we actually have a repository where you can share it amongst your other GIS experts. And then eventually we came out with our web version. But the real power is getting up to the server and getting to where the real end users are. And in the case of using this with Cognos, we can now leverage the metadata and the security built into Cognos, where now we can actually have one map. If you're a retailer, and let's say you've got 1,000 stores, I can have one map, and I can now, based on locking, and I only get to see my customers' data or my store performance data, I can have one map, and it will look 1,000 different ways depending on how I log in, because the data that feeds into the map is all coming through the query technique of Cognos. As opposed to having to build 1,000 individual maps, I can have one map and have lots of different cuts and views of them. All right, so let me go to PowerPoint for a second, and I want to go into a live presentation, live demonstration. So bear with me as I switch my screen over here. Hopefully you can see my screen here. In this case here, I'm running Cognos. I'm actually running Cognos on my machine here, and you've already seen a demonstration from Chris, so I'm not going to re-demonstrate all the things that you can do in the map viewer itself. I actually want to focus more on how do you do it? Where does this thing exist? And so I created a sample report, and again, I'm not here to give you a big Cognos demonstration of all the functionality of how you create charts and all these compelling dashboards in the product. So I'm going to start with something very, very simple here and just show you how this works. So I'm going to go into edit mode here. And again, you choose your company, you choose how you're going to allow people to use this feature or not. But if I go into my toolbox here, once I've installed the Spectrum Spatial for BI, you're going to have this new widget here called MI Map, and that just stands for Map Intelligence. That's what we actually call the viewer and the popover, the toolbars and all that stuff. In the viewer, we call that the Map Intelligence viewer. And so I just drag this over, and that's it. I save. So let me save this report now. And now that it's saved, I'm going to go ahead and close out of this for a second. And once I close out of this report, now that I've saved it, if I get this Java error all the time, I need to fix that. If I go back into that report, the very first time, it's going to come back and say, hey, you haven't configured it. I don't know what to put there. I haven't wired anything together. Now, there's controls when I drag this over it. It defaults to giving you this control up here. But this allows me up here, if I click this, it actually allows me to go into my configuration area. And this piece here is actually where I'm going to configure. And there's my sample report that I just built. And now I actually start configuring it. One of the first things I do is I have to tell it what map I want to use. Now, I've got a lot of maps on my machine. Some of these maps I built myself or uploaded. These could have come from anywhere. This could have been maps you already have inventoried. You might even be using another product. You might be using an Esri product. We read those. We can then publish that to the server, and then now we can render it here. So these are all kinds of different maps that I have. And I want to go against one here. Let's see here. I think I have one here called, thought I had one here called USA. Let me type that again here. There it is. I'm just going to use this one here called USA Map Send. It's just a map of the United States with some boundaries around it. But you'll notice here that the map tiling behind the scenes, it defaults to Google Maps. But if you want to use Bing, you want to use Esri, you want to use Mapbox, you want to use OpenStreetMaps, We don't really care what you use on the tiling behind this. This case, I'll just stick with Google here, and let me go ahead and create some points that I want to create. So I had a query. It was called map query, is what I named my query back in Cognos. And this map has locations of my stores. So if you remember in a demonstration earlier that Chris gave, we had store location. And now I see all the available columns that was part of that query. And I want name to be the label that I see on top of my points. And then the unique identifier here, each of these points have a unique ID, and I'm just going to choose that. It already found the latitude and longitude from the query. It automatically defaulted to the proper coordinate system. If you're using another coordinate systems, using the British grid, or you're using some other XY coordinates from some other system, we support all those. So you can change your coordinate systems if you're generating things separately. You don't have to use latitude and longitude. You can use XY and use a different coordinate systems. You pick, you choose how you want to do that. We know how to project those onto a map. For my pop-up help, I'm just going to select everything. I could be more discreet and only choose certain columns, but just for time's sake, I'm just going to pick them all. And then I get to pick here how I want these points to look. And we have this nice little wizard-based approach where you can use things, images. If you want to do an image or you want to do a gradient, change colors, like that one report we had, map we had, it changed from a red, yellow, green, depending on store performance and things like that. So we could do a multi-value or a single value. If you're doing something like this, you can actually have our out-of-the-box images, or you can actually upload your own. In this case here, I'm just going to stick with a basic shape, and I'm going to stick with a triangle. And then from a color, I'm going to pick red. And I'm going to go ahead and just test this. So I'm going to hit my little preview button here. And this is just a way to test to see if it actually works. So I'm going to click the button here, and now it's actually going to hopefully render my map. So there's my map using the Google tiling on the back end side. And so now that I know it works, I can close that down. I know it's going to work on my Cognos report. If I change my mind, I say I want to switch to Bing, you know, we can go ahead and switch to Bing. I'm going to hit the save button. So I'm actually going to save this configuration. And now I'm going to go back into this report. I'm going to close this report down and go back into that same report I called sample report. And it should now have a map, and it should have red squares. And if you also look down here in the bottom corner, you'll see I'm now using the Bing tiling behind the scenes. I have my layers here. So this particular map had zip code boundaries in it as well. But again, you can have your own proprietary boundaries based off of your sales territory or whatever you want to do. So we have whatever boundaries or whatever layers are built in the map are here. And that location one is one that I built directly by configuring it through that through the interface here. So you can build your own custom layers, as well as build your own layers right here that Chris was showing you earlier. The other thing you can do that you just hard to do with other BI mapping tools that Cognos has is if you want to add third-party WMS layers, we can actually add and embed other layers into this as well. And again, now that I have my map here, it's fully interactive, and I can zoom in, zoom out, do all the things I might want to with the map. Now, to get these points here, I had to have a latitude and longitude. And we talked a little bit earlier how we can help you with that. Because a lot of times people don't actually have latitude and longitude, or they might be just doing the lookup where I have a spreadsheet and I know certain latitude by zip codes or by cities or states and things like that, and I have like a centroid value. I don't actually go down all the way down to that parcel level where I want to get a point right on top of the rooftop of a house. And we have lots and lots of geocoding engines and different levels of granularity in that. And we also offer this directly as a service. So if you go out to pitneybowes.com, if you scroll all the way down to the very bottom, there's an area here called developers. And that takes you to this page I'm at right now. And you'll see that there's all these different API calls or on-demand calls that you can do. We can also do these in batch. So if we'd like, we could actually, you can send us a file through secured FTP. And if you have a batch file of 1 million addresses or 100 addresses or whatever it might be, we can do it. But you can actually test this out for yourself right now. So I'm just going to click on geocoding here. And we'll let you test this and play with this. And you'll see these are all available on demand and as a service from us. So instead of having to get all the data behind the scenes, because there's a lot of data that goes into this, we can actually test this. So it has a default in here of Boulder, Colorado. You can change this address in here. There's some advanced options on other things that you can set the match rates to and things. And then you hit try, and it actually will, and it comes back pretty quickly here. You're doing what's called a request, and then you get a response back from us. And the response back comes with a fully geocoded address with a confidence value. It also is going to help you standardize that address if it wasn't already, and give you some additional information, some directional information with that. Now, a lot of times people have addresses, but they're not very clean. The better the addresses are, the better the geocoding is going to be. But again, there's a lot in there on how we match up and how we find things. But we're not guessing here. We're actually finding. We typically are always at the point level. If you're looking for point level, which is what this particular premium geocoder is doing. If you want a more basic one where you're doing more street interpolation, where you're kind of knowing the range of the start and the end of the street, and I know based off the street number, I can pretty much guess that you're here. That's interpolating. We do that as well, and sometimes that's pretty good or good enough, but we don't have to do that. And there's a very unique thing that we have now. This is really good for BI and other things, which is we have a thing called the PB key. This is, we've taken every known parcel address in the entire United States. Again, we are Pitney Bowes, and we are in the mailing business for the last 98 years. We know every known parcel of land, and we've uniquely identified with the hash key value of that. So now that I've geocoded, and I know exactly what your PB key is for that piece of property, that land, that address, if you ever get other data from us, either health data or risk data or something else, I can do a regular equijoin key to key as opposed to having to do a spatial join, which typically is more costly to do that. But I just want to give you an idea of some of the things. Again, a lot of times people want to do maps, but one of the things that hinders them is they need to geocode their data, their customers, their competitors, their prospects, whatever it might be. I need to get those geocoded. We're making that very easy for you. So wanted to let you know you can do that. Or if you want get routing, or you want to enrich, or these other data sets. A lot of our data sets we offer in an on-demand. You pay per transaction as opposed to having to acquire all that data. Okay, so let me get back out of, hopefully you guys got an understanding of kind of how we can configure maps, how people can consume maps, and how that's all created. I want to go back, bear with me here as I switch back to my presentation here, is deployment. So on-premise is one of the ones that we support. You can go hybrid, where some is running on the cloud, some is not, or you can run fully on the cloud. We are not installed with Cognos. If our machine goes down, Cognos is still running. We do not. We have an API call back and forth. We're loosely coupled together, but we are not installing any type of DLLs or anything embedded in the Cognos where if somebody runs a massive job, it's going to kill your server. Not like that at all. It just looks like it's all together, but there's actually two separate pieces of software that play very nicely together. We're running close on time, so before we go any further, I think I want to go ahead and get into any questions that we might have.
Oh, thanks, Kevin. We do want to, lots of information coming in from folks. What version of Cognos Analytics is supported there?
Oh, that's great. So Chris is running, I think he's running 10.06. I'm still running on 10.05. We're getting ready to support 10.07. I think our next minor release will support that, but yeah, I'm running on 5 or 6.
Great. A question for Joe. What is the pricing model for Pitney Bowes? Is that a named user model or server-based?
Yeah, so from a software standpoint, it depends on what modules you're going to license. And from a data standpoint, it's all about which data sets. And we actually get very granular with the data sets of if you want to just license all the way down to a specific zip code. So pricing around that is dependent on data set and the size that you're looking to actually license for.
Great. And Kevin, back to you. Folks obviously have other BI tools in-house besides Cognos, and they're wanting to know, does Spectrum Spatial for BI work with other BI tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do. The nice thing there, it's the way the architecture looked. If you remember that slide that Chris showed, that we have this mapping server. So once you have your maps on that server, you can use different agents, be it the Cognos or Tableau or ClickSense or MicroStrategy or all the ones that we support. I think it's 8 BI tools that we support.
Oh, that's great news. Chris, we've got one for you. How long does it take to get up and running with Spectrum Spatial for BI?
Thank you. Yeah, it's actually a very straightforward process. The actual button pushing can probably only take a half a day or a day or two. Where we want to spend some time is the training. We want to make sure everybody understands how it works, how it integrates, and get people creating things on their own. So it's really not a heavy install at all. It's a really straightforward process.
Well, that's good news for a lot of folks. Kevin, back to you. Can folks create custom boundaries such as a sales territory or something along those lines with some Pitney tools?
Yeah, one of the things to this is that you do have to upload a map. And so we use our Map Info Pro, which is a desktop tool. Again, it can open up any mapping format out there. You know, all the mapping tools, all those desktop tools can open up those files. So you can build a custom map through a GIS expert in Map Info. In Map Info Pro now, there's a button that says Publish to Server, and now you push those maps now up to our repository, and once it's there, then you can consume that inside of Cognos or however you want to do that over the web.
Great. And I'm pretty sure that you talked about this, but we'll reiterate this question. Can they leverage existing shape files created in other geospatial tools?
They can, yeah, because since Map Info Pro can do that, then anything you can do at Map Info Pro from a mapping standpoint, you can now leverage inside of Cognos because we've exposed all the functionality of Map Info inside of the viewer that we have inside of the Cognos Spectrum Spatial for BI connector that we now have.
That's awesome. And then we're going to do this one last question and then give folks back to their day. Does Pitney include the ability to geocode addresses? And then can this data be written back to their, looks like a data warehouse?
Yeah. So that question probably came in earlier because we just did a kind of live demo, and you guys can feel free to go out to our website. You can actually play around with that. But absolutely, you can geocode your addresses. We also might want to use our address validation. So if you have addresses that are not quite validated, we also have on-demand address validation as well, and other data quality functionalities in there. But we can absolutely geocode your data, not just in the United States, but about 240, 250 countries around the world. We can geocode as well.
That's great. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. Really great solutions for folks, and exciting that all these systems are talking to each other in such a user-friendly way. Folks, do remember to keep an eye on that inbox. We will share the link to the recording with you. If you're requiring a certificate of attendance, we provide those as well. And we appreciate your input on the survey on the way out. Thanks again, Joe, Chris, Kevin, for being here and for Pitney Bowes sponsoring. We hope you'll join us again for another Directions and Pitney Bowes webinar. Have a great day and tell a friend about Directions.